So this is going to be a great panel. It's charging at utilities, EVs, and the road to electrified transit. We're going to have kind of hopefully a hybrid model where we're going to cover some slide decks from each of the panelists, and then we'll hopefully have time for some Q&A. I have some prepared canned questions, and then maybe we'll have some crowd input too. But to introduce our speakers, we're starting with Brittany Barrett. Brittany is the Deputy Director of Implementation and Operations for the Electric School Bus Initiative at WRI, or the World Resource Institute. Brittany works to help bring together all people and resources to facilitate the equitable nationwide transition of school buses from diesel to electric. Brittany has extensive fleet experience working with companies like Transdev, a large public transportation organization, and most recently served as the Assistant Director of Transportation at Emory University, where she saw shuttle and commute alternative program for 50,000 employees. So welcome, Brittany. Next, we'll hear from Jennah Denney. Jennah is the Senior Technology Integration Program Manager at the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, or NRECA. Jennah leads the initiatives that help bring electric cooperatives to integrate emerging technologies into their operation and member services. She does electric vehicles, distributed energy, DERS, beneficial electrification, energy efficiency, demand-side management, really an incredibly wide range of stuff. I only cover one of those topics, so I'm very much impressed. And she bridges innovation with practical, cooperative-focused solutions. So it'll be great to hear the cooperative take. And then finally, we hear from Emma Frantz. Emma is the lead project manager at the transit bus team at CALSTART. Emma supports transit agencies and stakeholders in adopting zero-emission solutions by developing tools, overseeing research, and providing resources that help streamline implementation. Prior to joining CALSTART, Emma built a background in clean transportation by helping fleets navigate emissions regulations and secure grant funding and identify policies and incentives that support the shift to cleaner technologies. So this is an incredible panel. We'll start with Brittany with her slide deck, if that works, and we'll go from there.
Microphone's too smart for me today. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. It's my first time at this conference. I was actually born in Lafayette, Louisiana, but moved when I was 5, so it's been a minute since I've been back. Little disclaimer here about the images here. WRI is a global research organization working to improve people's lives, protect nature, and halt climate change. We are in countries across the globe. Our offices in the US are in DC. I specifically work on the Electric School Bus Initiative, and our aim here is to electrify all 480,000 school buses in the United States equitably, and to build an ecosystem around that to help this make momentum towards full electrification on all medium heavy-duty vehicles. So I just want to start with some numbers, a little bit about the benefits of electric school buses. School buses are iconic. Can I see hands? Did anybody ride a school bus to school? Okay, yeah, so people either have really fond memories of that or really terrible memories of that. But most people remember that smell from the diesel, right? Okay, yeah, it brings back memories of school, yeah. So for over a century, these buses have been running. This is actually the 100-year anniversary of the school bus, I found out earlier this year, yeah. It's pretty interesting. Originally it was horse-drawn, but in some form or fashion, it's been around. There are about almost 20 million students that ride school buses every day out of about 53 million students that go to school. The amount of trips that are taken on school buses is more than that of public transit here in the US. The fleet is also significantly larger. For perspective, there's about 60 to 70,000 public transit buses in the US, 480,000 school buses. So converting these buses to electric ensures a healthy ride for children, drivers, and communities, while also providing climate benefits. So if we were to electrify the entire fleet of school buses, we would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 9 million metric tons. That's like taking 2 million cars off the road just through school buses. Electric school buses produce about half the greenhouse gas emissions of both propane and diesel school buses. And as renewable energy usage on the grid increases, it's the only way that we're going to continue to reduce those emissions. A little bit more specifically about the harms of diesel exhaust. Diesel is a known carcinogen and can lead to asthma, cancer, and other respiratory illnesses. Here in Louisiana, almost 9% of children have asthma, according to the American Lung Association. Diesel fumes have proven links to serious physical and health impacts, and the exposure of these is actually inequitably distributed. About 70% of low-income students ride the bus versus closer to 20% of white students ride the bus. And those students that ride it are typically riding it for longer periods of time than their white counterparts. So where are we with electric school bus adoption here in the U.S.? This map comes from the tracking that WRI does. Electric school buses are running in 49 states. Anybody here from Wyoming? No? Okay. We're trying to get one in Wyoming. That's the only one we're missing here. Also in the American Samoas, DC, Puerto Rico, and other places, tribal nations. So we have over $4 billion of funding has been applied for through the Clean School Bus program, and we have over 12,000 electric school buses committed or in operation. So let me be slightly more specific and highlight a couple of numbers. As I just mentioned, there's about a little over 12,000. I think as of yesterday, it was closer to 14,000. We update our data dashboard once a month, and it's available on our website, electricschoolbusinitiative.org. Welcome to take a look at that. Sorry, I'm referring to my notes here. I want to make sure I get my numbers correct. Electric school buses are already operating in every type of community, but there is a larger share in urban and suburban areas, smaller share in town and rural areas. However, the largest share of school districts with at least one electric school bus are in rural areas, 36%, followed by suburban areas, 26%. And school districts in towns account for about 14%. So they're out there, they're operating, but we know that ESBs cost about 3 to 4 times that of a regular diesel bus. So how are school districts paying for this? Many of you may have heard of the Clean School Bus program. There was $5 billion allocated for this. And that has paid for the vast majority of school buses in the U.S. California, New York, Illinois, Texas, and Pennsylvania have the most Clean School Bus program funded ESBs. And there are still $2 billion left in this program that has not been allocated yet, and the funds are still available. So we are eagerly anticipating EPA releasing a new round of funding. We thought maybe before the end of the year, but don't know that for sure. I think we have heard mentioned several times over the last 2 days that there is a shift in the administration's perspective on electric vehicles. And so that makes it a little difficult to plan for this. However, there is still a lot of momentum at the state level. There's over $3 billion in funding across 32 states. More than 30 states have allocated this funding. Recent examples include Michigan, where there's been $125 million allocated. New York has $500 million allocated. In fact, over $2.9 billion in public funds have been awarded across the country, from Florida to Alaska. Now, the funding mechanisms vary by state. I have a little bit of details here on this slide about the different kinds of funding mechanisms that are available. So specifically here in Louisiana, what's been going on. The data on this chart comes from our data dashboard. Again, I just pulled up a screenshot from that. There's been a $16 million awarded as of June of last year to purchase clean school buses. We know that they're operating in service. I spoke to a school district yesterday. Not a smooth sailing there, but they are in operation. Now, as funding availability to offset the upfront cost of these school buses decreases, we have been seeing school districts and communities find additional value in these assets, and that is through V2X. So vehicle to anything. These school buses are ideal for this because they have predictable operational schedules, very large battery capacity, and this could be a potential new revenue stream for districts. So beyond the benefits directly to students of transporting them safely with clean air, they have the potential to bring additional benefits to the community. They hit a strategic sweet spot because they're publicly owned, highly visible, they have predictable routes, and long dwell times. They're a great proving ground for scaling towards electrified transit more broadly. For Louisiana utilities, school buses offer a managed load opportunity, charging at known times and known locations, ideal for piloting grid integration, demand response, rate design, and even V2G for community resilience. So I have some, these are a little difficult to see over here, but on the, well, it's, I guess to your right, my left, the map of the school bus pilots for V2G, vehicle to grid, that are going on across the United States. And that's slightly more advanced, but in states where there's outage risk from storms, here in Louisiana, definitely. ESBs can double as a mobile battery source, and they can power resources like shelters. They can keep refrigerators on in the schools so they don't lose the food there and have those additional expenses. These deployments also build workforce pipelines, chassis charging support, infrastructure, and that benefits the broader electrification of transit and medium heavy-duty vehicles. We have a case study on our website about a rural school district in Oklahoma and how they invested in ESBs and have them now set up to provide additional resilience. Florida, and then this last one here, the Mover project, is in Hood River, Oregon. So all across the U.S., utilities and school districts are finding benefits beyond transporting students. So these are just a few examples of places where ESBs are bringing resilience benefits to communities. So I just wanted to close with a couple of maybe call to actions for those of you in the room representing different stakeholders in the ESB ecosystem. These come from our policy playbook, which is also available on our website. So for utility programs, and enabling regulatory policies, buses can be interactive assets to the grid, not just new loads. So I would ask for you to work towards approving fair and equitable rates for ESB charging, designing utility programs that are equitable, consider rate neutral cost recovery mechanisms, and approve and collect data from V2X programs. I think that's one of the main areas where we're lacking the information is the actual data from the operations of these vehicles and the charging from these vehicles. For manufacturing and infrastructure organizations that might be in the room, partner in training. This is one of the key areas that we see a deficit to the school districts, not having trained mechanics for the buses and the chargers. So working on that, bolstering domestic supply chain, and this is helping build out U.S. jobs. All of these school buses are manufactured here in the U.S. And provide training as part of the procurement process, getting school districts up to speed with being able to work on these buses themselves. And for any state agencies or legislators, include ESBs in state-led EV charging plans, require ESBs in utility planning, authorize funding and financing assistance for infrastructure, and also fund training. So WRI is here to help support this. Again, we are a nonprofit. We try to be neutral on any private entities that are involved, and we just provide resources and to help school districts, and all of our tools and resources are completely free. These are just a sampling of the over 300 tools and resources that are available on our website at electricschoolbusinitiative.org. And with that, I will close and turn it over. Oh, you can scan this QR code also. It'll take you to our website, and this is my email and contact information. So thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. That was so interesting. I thought it was insightful how large the electric school bus fleet is. And then for me personally, I really wish I was plugged in with y'all's initiative. A couple years ago, there was an electric school bus fleet. It was our first, medium heavy duty fleet that we supported at Cleco. And it was there was a lot of learning involved on the Cleco side, and a lot of learning from the school board, the community. I now know exactly where to go on the future project, so I'm really excited about that. But I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions at the end if we have time, but now we're going to go to Jennah.
Thank you. And my presentation is a very long title. I'm going to call it Rewired for short. I like to say it once, rural electric workflow improvements for the rapid vehicle supply equipment deployment, which is a federally funded project. That's maybe one part of the conversation I'm going to discuss today. But again, this is the utility panel, right? And I jokingly said to Emma, I said, none of us are utilities, but I do represent 967 of them. So I'll give a little bit of the cooperative perspective and talk about how NRECA, the National Trade Association that serves rural electric cooperatives and other utilities, such as public power districts, what resources and projects and programs that these innovative co-ops are exploring. To tell you a little bit about our co-ops, we serve 56% of the land mass of the United States. Do I have anybody on a co-op line in the room? I see a couple of hands. Excellent. So 56% of the land mass. In most areas, we are in counties, 92% of counties in persistent poverty. We serve rural America. Some of these areas have become more suburban and urban as these territories are growing out. But again, 42 million consumers, over 900 utilities, making up a third of the nation's utility landscape. We are smaller than your IOUs, than even most munis in most cases. But don't let that distract from the innovation that you're seeing with these co-ops, accepting and integrating new technologies like electric vehicles. I think Blake said we're getting pulled in different directions. I borrowed this slide from EPRI, the research institute serving utilities, and I like to show this because every meeting I've been to in the last year, data centers are sucking the air out of the room, and transportation conversations have often got pushed aside. EPRI did a study covering over 20 different scenarios between now and 2050. And if you can see, the dark blue line is data centers. Electrolysis and EVs making up the chunk of new load. Something that at the utility sector, we've saw stagnant growth for years. We saw EVs as an awesome opportunity to create programs and increase electrification efforts at the utility level. Oftentimes, those were manageable through managed charging programs and rates. But as we see extensive load growth in all scenarios, we are pulled in different directions. At the same time, we're seeing baseload generation retirements at this massive load growth point for a utility. So our dual pressures of reliability and affordability, these are efforts that no matter what utility type you are, a municipal, an IOU, a co-op, that are the cornerstones of what we do. And so we know that, again, going back to serving 56% of the land mass of the United States, we're gonna see EV growth look different. For example, in New Orleans versus Chico County, Arkansas. I think Barrett maybe still isn't here. I actually am from Arkansas originally. Hey, I see some other hands. And I did actually relocate from New Orleans to South Carolina recently, so I have a history with both of these states. Going back here though, we look at things at the national level at the Trade Association often. These are just a few points that I know have already been discussed throughout this meeting that, we have seen steady growth in EVs. We have seen a little bit of a tail right now, which could signal less adoption. We know that spikes up at the end of the year. These are a few trends that we look at in the co-op space. This is not in draft form anymore, but keeping the co-ops up to date with what's happening from a federal funding standpoint with programs like the EPA Clean School Bus Program, updated NEVI guidance at OMB, and other initiatives. We try to keep them abreast of these so they can integrate that in their planning. I heard that today too, planning, and that looks different for a fleet operator and utility, but a lot of collaboration is needed. So if we look at some of these numbers today, we may signal that EV sales are slowing, perhaps. But globally, we're seeing investments in batteries, which are primarily being driven by electric vehicles right now. So we see this at the electric cooperative sector as a planning window. So what are we doing about that? We're not looking at this just globally. We serve America's electric cooperatives. So we've actually looked at a few different EV integration studies. So co-ops can better plan for when a fleet, like in Montana, who is receiving 30 transit buses in a co-op territory, marking the largest electrified transportation load in co-ops, to the La Plata V2G that I actually saw on Brittany's slide. So demonstrating how we can use these electric vehicles and their charging equipment as a distributed energy resource. I'll kind of play on that one because it has to do with the bus. Buses were early test beds for V2X, V2G, and La Plata Electric Association out of Durango, Colorado, actually demonstrated that. And we're working with them to model what that impact looks like at the residential level. So, as you heard, I play in a lot of sandboxes. It's the cooperative way for sure to wear many hats. So in my DER world, how do we turn these loads that we were really excited about 10 years ago into something that could even out some of the spikiness and challenges that we have as we're serving data centers and other loads? We also looked at local impacts, so data. How do we actually know how EVs are going to impact our grid and how we can best serve these new loads? Looking at local feeders. What are the impacts of between 1 and 100 EVs in areas that you may not typically assume, like in Middle Tennessee or near the Raleigh area in North Carolina? So, between those studies and helping co-ops actually understand the impacts and what we need to do to best serve this, we also received $2.4 million from the federal government for that very long sentence I shared with you, Rewired, to look at the workflows. What can we control as utilities in making this process smoother and easier? Some of the words I heard today that we need to integrate these types of clean fuels in. So we're looking at the processes at utilities, what we can control. And we're working with a cooperative advisory board of over 30 co-ops across the nation to deliver a guidebook and a dashboard to reduce soft costs associated with charging, reduce timelines, and improve grid integration. It's our response to how do we make this easier. If we're not bringing a solution, we're part of the problem. So we're creating a guidebook that's leveraging utility-to-utility peer lessons, best practices around what we're going to call the energization process. The federal government wants to call it interconnection. I'm a little bit of a nerd. That would indicate two-way power flow. So energization is going to be the term we use. We're also developing a dashboard to help co-ops and utilities understand the impact on distribution transformers, something that has been a supply chain battle for many years. It is improving, but not going away soon. So in this project, we did not do this in the vacuum of our 32 co-ops. We called the industry. We called other trade groups, other flavors of utilities, other OEM manufacturers, fleet operators, to understand challenges and gaps in the energization space associated with EV charging. We also benchmarked our co-ops to understand costs and timelines around varying different sites with and without capacity and available infrastructure at sites to help us best research. We just exited year 1 of this project and closed out our first task on 9/30. So very excited to be moving into these stages, but a couple of these findings I want to share with this group and demystify some definitions. Again, energization versus interconnection. I kind of summarized that, signaling two-way power. So as we talk about Rewired, it's going to be improving energization processes. These are kind of the accepted steps from our cooperative advisory board, and making sure that these steps are transparent, well understood, and that those fleets, those individuals looking to deploy this infrastructure know what steps they need to take. So many roadblocks happen because of misinformation, bad submissions, and some things that we can't control, like supply chain. But here are the steps that we're focusing in this project that will be ongoing through 2027. To close these out, just a few of the key challenges and emerging solutions that popped up were, obviously, when we talk about products like school buses or fleets, it's timelines, weeks versus years. You see a mismatch between those developers and the utility in many cases. Especially at small utilities like co-ops, in many cases, there may not be a single point of contact for EVs. I used to work at a generation and transmission utility, and as Richie mentioned, I worked in a lot of different areas. So yeah, my name might have been next to the solar contact, the EV contact, but necessarily there might not be somebody just dedicated to that you might see at a Cleco or an Entergy, for example. And so supply chain delays we've touched on, staffing and skill gaps, limited EV expertise across the industry. We know that. We're often in the same rooms with many of these people over and over again. Obviously, emerging solutions, we've heard it, proactive outreach. NRECA has been working with our members to develop tools in partnership with Daimler and large loads to enable proactive outreach by understanding the potential and propensity for Class 8 vehicles. And so different ways like that, we have member service representatives, key account managers, that their whole role is dedicated to helping fleets and individuals take these projects off the ground. And so as part of emerging solutions too, it's phase and flexible interconnection with stage service, especially when you're talking about, and I think I heard this in the panel before too, it was like, bite off enough that you can chew right now and keep going, as we can make this simple, but time is of the essence and isn't always on our side. So considerations for utility. Do we have many utilities in the room? Okay, I got a couple. Okay, so some of the proactive recommendations we've been making with our members go around cross-functional EV working group teams. When you put a group of engineers and your marketing and member service people in a room together, that needs to happen more often. Oftentimes those member service representatives are on the front line of these calls around energizing EV chargers. Understand your transformer loading and what your limits are and what's needed for long-term planning. Have those proactive conversations to understand your procurement. Define and just make them available, your interconnection and energization. You would be shocked to find out how many people and how many utilities do not have that available. And so making that clear, as well as rates to understand the cost impacts and leading those conversations can help with bringing pilots to programs. And with that, that is my contact information. I do not have a fancy QR code. My IT department does not let me. But this is my contact information if you'd like to reach out.
Thank you, Jennah. That was really interesting, insightful. I think you're talking about the cross-functional teams. The utility really resonates with me. You know, that sort of shallow the surface of Cleco, where we have commercial people that are used to working with EVs. We have the engineers that are used to doing, EV energization projects. And it really, everything flows better, and I think it helps to have people who can understand the customer. And customers can sometimes struggle to tell utilities exactly what they need, and understanding what they're trying to do and having some familiarity with it can really speed up the process. Well, awesome. So Emma, we're going to go to you now to talk about your experience with the transit buses, so I can't wait to hear from you.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much. My name's Emma Frantz. I'm a lead project manager at CALSTART. Today I'm going to walk you through some of the mistakes that we've seen transit agencies make from switching from traditional internal combustion engine vehicles to zero emission. I've been working with all kinds of fleets for a number of years. A lot of it, there are a lot of challenges that can come up, a lot of mistakes that can be made, and we want to make sure that you don't just have these vehicles sitting around and you don't have the chargers or the maintenance abilities to operate on these vehicles. So I'm just going to walk through some of the mistakes and solutions that we've seen to help the transition go a little more smoothly. But first, before I get into that, a little bit about CALSTART. We are a nonprofit. We work with anyone within the transportation industry to transition to low and zero emission vehicles. We, despite our name, CALSTART, a lot of people think that we're just in California, but we do have a national presence. We work in states all across the country, and we work internationally as well. And specifically on the transit team, I work with transit agencies to help transition to low and zero emission buses, and bringing together leaders and policymakers and tech providers to make the transition, again, go a little more smooth, and help agencies understand, who their partners are and what they need to do to have a successful transition. We manage over $1 billion in vehicle incentive and technical assistance programs. So we do that by providing technical support, grant writing, and program management of various different types of programs. So to get into some of the mistakes we see, I know we've talked about this a little bit already, but not having a cohesive program team is going to cause a lot of issues later on in the planning process. So you're not doing this alone. Make sure that you have a project team that includes external partners such as utilities, technology providers, and consultants and contractors to help you with the strategy and the management aspect of it. That's where CALSTART can come in. And then also internal partners. You want to make sure that you have your drivers, your maintenance teams, your planners on board with this transition. So connecting everyone early, making sure you know everyone who needs to be involved in the process and that they're all in the discussions, setting up the right communication structures, doing all of that at the beginning of the planning process is really going to ensure some success. So just the bottom line here is, again, you don't have to do it alone. Make sure you have the right project partners, and make sure you're communicating with them and collaborating with them as early as possible. And then calling your utility after the buses are ordered. That's something that you do not want to do. You want to bring in your utility as soon as possible. There are lead times with getting your sites the electricity that you need. It could be months or even years. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to fleets who have said, oh, well, we have buses, but we don't have the infrastructure installed, so we can't run the buses. Don't let that happen to you. Make sure that you're talking to your utility as soon as planning starts, or honestly, even if you're just talking about, hey, maybe we should go towards electrification. What is that going to look like? Talk to your utility first. They can go through a load profile analysis. They can ensure that you have proper infrastructure planning, so you can have all of that being done while you're ordering the buses. So again, bottom line, put your utility on your project team. Mistake number 3 is designing infrastructure only for today's fleet. So what do I mean by this? Let's say you have 1 or 2 buses coming in. You don't think you need that much energy at your site. You have the capability, the physical space for just a couple of buses, but you're not thinking about scalability. So even if you're only getting a couple buses now, and if those buses actually end up, working out really well, you think you want to purchase more buses, but you didn't design that in your planning in the first place, then that can have a lot of additional costs added on. So anticipating future power needs. Don't just think about a couple buses that you're going to get in the near term. What additional power needs will be needed for your entire bus electrification? Think about that. What is long term, what is this going to look like if I transition my entire fleet to zero emission? or a good portion of the fleet. And then on top of that, another issue that we see is if you are getting a certain kind of bus. So let's just say, okay, I'm just going to get transit buses. So I'm just going to get these charging stations that are specifically for these transit buses that I'm getting. But that doesn't take into account other needs within the fleet. You might need smaller shuttle buses, or you might need some vans or trucks. And if you're not planning for them to use the same charging infrastructure, then that's going to be a whole other cost. So you want to look at universal charging as well. You want to be able to support as many vehicles with one charger as you can. So making sure that you are thinking about those kinds of things as well. So it's not just planning for transit, but other vehicles. And then physical space. It takes a lot of space to charge vehicles, to park your vehicles and, make sure that all of them are charging at the time they need to charge. So making sure that you have the space to do so. And if your lot where you park the buses doesn't have the space, maybe you're looking into in-route charging. Like, that's always an option as well. So you need to determine where your bus is going to charge. Do you have the space in your parking lot to charge all the buses? Is in-route charging an option? Those kinds of things as well. And then just thinking about the evolving operational requirements. How are the vehicles going to operate in the long term? And will you have different needs? I work with a lot of universities as well who sometimes need additional vehicles for special events. So thinking about those kinds of things as well. How are your operations going to change? Will you need additional charging to support those kind of, one-off times, like when you need additional vehicles? And then, the main point here is not just thinking about what you're doing right now, but seeing ways that where you can scale, so that way you can avoid any kind of costly upgrades to infrastructure, I think that was the main point there. And then mistake number 4 is overlooking operations and maintenance planning. So thinking beyond just the vehicles, who and how are you going to maintain those vehicles? When you are building contracts with your project partners, make sure that you really outline who's going to be responsible for maintenance. Include service agreements in those contracts. You don't want to bring your vehicles in and then something happens and then you don't know, how you're going to fix those vehicles. You don't want to have these stranded assets laying around. So make sure that you are working with your project partners on understanding the operations and maintenance aspect as well. And then along those same lines, beyond just the vehicles, what about the workforce? One of the biggest mistakes is not investing in your workforce. The electric vehicle market is still evolving. The technology is still evolving. There's still so much to learn. And so make sure that your maintenance teams and your drivers understand how to operate and how to work on these vehicles. If they don't, you can have safety concerns, you can have mistakes, you can experience turnover. If the workers feel frustrated that they don't have the resources they need to do the job, or they have these buses that they can't drive because no one knows how to fix them, it can be a huge problem for transit agencies when, you really want to transition to zero emission, but you don't have your workers on board, or they don't know how to properly work with these vehicles. So there are a lot of grants available. I know you heard them talking about Gumbo today. There are so many state and federal funding opportunities to be able to build up your workforce to work on these vehicles. CALSTART is another resource that we can help you find those opportunities. We can help you apply for grants. So just, one of the biggest points I want to drive here is it's not just the vehicles that you're thinking about when you transition to electric buses. You want to look at the entire landscape, the entire ecosystem, and that includes your workforce as well. So we have been doing this for over 30 years. We have a lot of experience in the EV space. Basically, to summarize this, start early, collaborate widely, and plan for the future. And what do I mean by that? Start as soon as possible, reaching out to your stakeholders, to your project partners, collaborate with them, understand whose roles and responsibilities are what, make sure that they know how to communicate with you, how to bring up problems as they arise so you're not facing something down the road when you're already about to deploy those vehicles and you're not able to, and then planning for the future, thinking about scalability, how can you best use the resources, invest in the right things now to help you in the future. And again, gonna just really bring it home here by explaining we are here to help you. We are a nonprofit. We offer a lot of these services and support for free because we want to see the benefits that are brought with zero emission vehicles. So we can help you with technical and infrastructure planning. We can work with the utilities and help you understand what steps you need to take to do so. We do financial and performance modeling, so we can look at the total cost of ownership. Is this something that is really going to make sense for you? Will you get a return on investment? Are your buses going to perform how you need them to perform? We're not just going to sit here and say, oh yeah, you should transition to zero emission buses because that's the best. We want to make sure that it's going to be profitable for you, that you're not just going to be wasting money on these. And we understand that there are certain times where it doesn't necessarily make sense. A zero emission bus cannot support your operations in the way that you need it to. So we might look at, okay, well, where are some other opportunities where you can transition to zero emission? So that's what we do with that performance modeling and making sure that this is something that is going to work for you. And then we do grant proposal and strategy development. So we will work with you to write grants, and we will help you develop a strategy for transitioning to zero emission. And again, that's beyond just the vehicles. We'll work with you on a workforce development plan. We'll work with you with finding project partners, finding the best infrastructure providers, the best charge management systems that work for you. We know we have a large database of vehicles that are out there, of the charging systems that are out there, and we can help you find what works best for you, and we can build that into a strategy for you and into a grant proposal. And then stakeholder engagement and partnerships. We are a member-based company. We have a lot of connections out there, so we know who does what in the transportation industry. And if you're looking for a partner for a certain project, we are more than happy to make connections. That's what we're here for. We're trying to make this easier for you. We understand that these technologies are very new for a lot of people, and it's very complex, and we want to make this as simple as we can to make it easy for you to make that transition. And that's all I have. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I have a QR code right there. Yeah, that's the
I really
thing
need
now.
to get a QR code myself, actually. I'm feeling left out.
Yeah, so that should take you straight to connecting with us. So yeah.
Emma, that was great. It's so interesting. I'm a huge fan of just buses in general. I live off of 2 bus routes in New Orleans, and if you're going to the right spot at the right time, and that's not always the case, it's better than an Uber Black. Like, you can stand up straight while you get in and get out, and the air conditioner works really well. And I imagine that electric buses are even better for that, so pretty neat. So I'm going to ask some questions, and then we might have time at the end for some audience involvement. But Brittany, I want to start with like the toughest question. There's a high-profile failure of Lion Electric, ESB manufacturer. What are y'all learning from that, and how are fleets responding to that failure from like a maintenance and warranty basis? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So yes, Lion Electric did go bankrupt in the U.S. They've reconstituted and are still in operation in Canada, but they have said that they are not honoring any of the warranties on the buses here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we have been working actually with one of Emma's colleagues, the CALSTART's school bus group, and several other nonprofit organizations to try and collect as much information as we can that exists about with Lion software and technical specs, parts, lists, schematics, and drawings, and make those available to school districts. So those there will be a form on our website. I think tomorrow it'll be live where you can request that. We were able to get a significant amount of data downloaded working with 2 of the school districts that had Lion buses. We also know several private companies that are offering to do maintenance. Of course, there's a cost to it, but they've also procured a lot of the parts. And then there is 2 former Lion mechanics that are kind of have their own business now, and they're available to help support school districts too. So we're happy. All of that information is on electricschoolbusinitiative.org. And then there's if you go to the resources, you can type in Lion FAQs, and we've tried to provide as much information there as possible. The most urgent issue was Lion did have a thermal event on one of their buses in Canada. Had nothing to do with the battery system. It was a wiring in the defroster, and they are sending out notifications on the inspections that they're supposed to do in Canada, but they have not been communicating at all with the school districts in the U.S. So we are trying to forward that information out to any district that we're aware of, worked with EPA so that any grantees that they know, NREL, CalSTART, the Alliance for Electric School Buses, and several other nonprofits. So if you know of a school district that has a Lion bus, happy to try and reach out to them. I mentioned I met with East Baton Rouge Parish yesterday to try to figure out how to support them on it. So there are resources. They do cost money, but they are available.
Well, I'm glad it sounds like there's a small industry forming around servicing the buses. I know it costs money when maybe they didn't expect it, but it's better than having a stranded asset. So I encourage you to kind of watch this issue evolve. Next question is for Jennah. Cleco, I think, like your member cooperatives, is actually a fairly rural, service territory for us, or for the state. And there's differences in EV adoption between rural and urban populations. What do you make of that trend? And do you feel like that trend will hold, or is it something that maybe like rural communities can I guess bridge the gap from like the adoption perspective?
Yeah, and I guess, as I mentioned, adoption shows up differently in different places. We have a moniker in co-op world: if you've met one co-op, you've met one co-op. And that's true to their service territories too, and they're diverse in nature. For example, the Middle Tennessee project I share, they're seeing 40% growth year after year in electric vehicle. They're outside of the Nashville area, right? And so you'll see co-ops like Adams Electric, that's in Pennsylvania. That's not too far from the DC metro area. So it's like those natural trends that you're seeing, and it's based on a few things. Availability is one. So when I bought my third electric vehicle, I lived in Arkansas at the time, and I had to drive to Dallas to buy it. Like, it was not available in my area, and I lived in the capital city. So think about how much more difficult that could be for a ruralite living, again, an hour maybe to the nearest metro area. Do they make sense in rural areas? Just as much as they'd make sense anywhere else, right? We do drive about 30 to 40% more than a person living in town, I put in quotations, because longer distances. Batteries in vehicles today meet those needs, but again, availability, this time of infrastructure. We're scared. We're scared. If we don't see that public charger, even though we may not use it, we still know 85% of that charging is happening at home. But just knowing it's there makes you feel a little bit better, right?
Yep.
And the utilization rates in rural areas are lower, and doesn't make it a sexy location for the developers to put these chargers in. We've seen in some states developers actually saying, you know, we put these out here, we hit the 5 years that were obligatory for VW funding. Now we're going to take them out and put them somewhere else because they make more financial sense there. So as long as we have strong programs around home charging, you know, and the availability of these models in a reasonable amount of distance, there are savings to be incurred by members. Again, 92% of counties we serve, or 92% of counties in persistent poverty we serve. So if there's an opportunity for reduced costs, availability of vehicles and infrastructure, it's a win-win-win. But you also can't put a square peg in a circle hole. So when it makes sense, it makes sense.
Yeah, that's really insightful, especially the availability question. You know, a lot of rural dealers are just not used to selling EVs. They don't request them from the manufacturers, and they're not used to servicing them either. So definitely seen that in my experience. I think you're exactly right.
Servicing's a big part.
Yep.
Like, even when I lived in New Orleans, I'd have to travel to a specific place to get it maintenance, and so it can be challenging.
Awesome. So Emma, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but are there like benefits to like passenger satisfaction on a like electric bus versus a ICE bus? Like, are y'all seeing that?
Yeah. So we are seeing a lot of, I mean, even the drivers and the passengers are really enjoying the electric buses. They're a lot quieter, which they like, and some of the concerns that have come up are in kind of cold weather or hot weather environments, and how can the buses run and still heat or cool off the bus while still using the battery, and does that impact efficiency? And you know, the answer is yes, it will impact efficiency slightly, but one of the things that CALSTART is doing is we are working with the FTA on a number of research projects where we're looking into other zero emission alternatives for using the bus battery for heating and cooling off the cabin. So, yeah, I mean, overall, we're seeing a lot of satisfaction. That has been, you know, one of the main concerns. On top of that is safety. You know, there's always the question of battery fires and, you know, is it safe for me to get on this bus? And the reality is, battery fires are so low in the US. They get big headlines because of just the way that, you know, the rhetoric is around buses, but it doesn't happen very often. So yes, they are safe to ride in. So yeah, I mean, overall, we've heard a lot of good feedback.
That's great, and the fire thing really resonates with me. I think there was, maybe it was about 2 years ago, it seemed like TikTok was just nonstop serving people videos of electric vehicles on fire. Sometimes they weren't even electric vehicles, it was just a car on fire, and if you called it an electric vehicle, it went around the world. There was actually a fairly significant car fire in the French Quarter in New Orleans, I think it was last year. And first thing I did was zoom in as close as I could and try to identify what type of car it was. And it was an ICE car, and nobody cared. It shut off a quarter of the French Quarter for like a whole afternoon. And it's not news, but if it was a battery, I think people would have been really interested. I think that's dying off a little bit, but it's definitely a concern on the ESB side of things too. You know, we had feedback on, you know, the deployment we supported of, you know, this isn't safe for our kids to be in, and that's you know, not the case. But I think if all of the news you get about EV is on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook, maybe it seems like a logical conclusion. But that's also kind of our job. Everybody in the industry, we have to communicate and talk about these issues to the public, and it's a challenge.